When it comes to getting stronger, there are a million different ways that we can go about setting up our programming. And you hardcore lifters out there are probably looking for ways that you can optimize your training in order to maximize your progress in the long run. Now, one such way that you can try to do this, that many of you probably have tried to do it or that you've considered trying, is by utilizing a high-frequency training approach. Training at a higher frequency allows you to accrue more volume, it allows you to accrue more volume at higher intensities, and it allows you to keep training session duration at a more reasonable length, right? The more sessions that you have, the shorter that each session can potentially be. Now, taking this concept further, some people, myself included, have also often utilized what is both a high specificity and high frequency approach. That is, training the specific lift or lifts that you want to improve essentially as often as possible. So that could be anywhere from 3 all the way up to 14 times per week. I think I've gone up to that 10 to 12 range myself by using multiple daily sessions of training the same exercise. And I'm not going to go into the specifics of how or why somebody would set up a high frequency approach one way or another, as the nitty-gritty details of these sorts of things are more for the people who actually choose to hire me as a coach, and this channel is reserved more so for broad concepts. But if you do it well, I will say, this sort of approach can be incredibly powerful, in the short term. In terms of hitting personal bests, you can potentially put yourself in a position to shatter all of your best lifts. But there is a major pitfall that you need to know about with this high specificity, high frequency training that you've probably never heard anybody else talk about before. And I'm speaking from experience here, both firsthand and secondhand. But with these sorts of high frequency, high specificity approaches, you become a slave to them. That is, the higher that you push the frequencies, the more and more dependent that your body becomes on them in order to make progress. If you start training a lift 4 or 5 or even 6 times per week, you're going to have a very, very hard time coming back around to the other side and making progress on lower frequencies of training, on more sustainable and sane methods of training. You will have a very hard time progressing with those methods for a very long period of time to come after these bouts of high frequency training. And I think that the main reason for this is really simply due to neural efficiency. When you start practicing a lift that often, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 times per week, you become incredibly efficient at executing that specific movement pattern to such an extent that you are making the absolute most of all of the force production capacity that you possess within that specific lift. This enhanced efficiency is one reason, probably the main reason, why you can make such huge leaps, such huge gains in the first few weeks or months of starting to train this way. But training like this is not sustainable for the long run. So then you have to ask yourself, you gotta ask the question, what happens when you take it away? What happens when life inevitably intervenes and forces you to take a week off from the gym, or even just a few days? If you're training a lift 6 or 7 times per week and you're suddenly forced out of the gym for 3, 4, or 5 days, that's actually a considerable layoff now. And that time off creates a reduction in efficiency that leads to a rapid reduction in how much weight you are capable of lifting. I shit you not, I personally squatted heavy every day for like 90 straight days, something like that. It might have even been more than that. And during that time period, I hit PR after PR after PR, leading my way up to my first ever 500-pound squat. I went on vacation. I took 1 week off. I came back and I could not squat 450 pounds anymore. So then what happened after that? I got scared to take time off because I was too stupid to realize that it was the ridiculous frequency that was the real problem, not rest from training. You don't lose force production capacity to that extent in a week, right? but you do lose neural efficiency. I was a slave to the frequency, and it took me years to build back up and exceed those old PRs with more sustainable training methods. I did eventually do so, but it took me like 3 or 4 years. My friend did the full small off squat cycle back in the day, squatting 4 times per week for some ridiculous volume in each training session. And this kid hadn't even been within sniffing distance of a 300-pound squat. We're in like our early 20s. His PR was maybe 240 or 250, but I distinctly remember this. I can play it back in my mind's eye. I can see it right now. After this little shit completed small off, he tested his squat and he crushed 315 pounds, 3 wheels. That was his goal, right? And then a couple weeks after cessation of the program, he could barely squat 250 pounds, and he never came close to sniffing another 300-pound squat again. The problem with this high frequency and high specificity is that it brings with it a whole host of potential negative issues, such as physical staleness. The patterns may feel crisp, but your body is just bored of them. Psychological burnout. It becomes exceedingly mentally difficult to come in and match a specific level of high performance day in and day out when you have all these previous benchmarks and landmarks in your head about what you want to do that day or should be able to do that day and what you just did yesterday, as well as potential overuse injuries from simply performing the same shit over and over and over again. A bout of high frequency heavy squatting is when my torn hip labrum, for example, started to become a major issue for me. So these days I generally lean towards more sustainable methods with the people that I coach. What I would consider to be sane and sustainable training, sane and sustainable overall volumes and frequencies that allow us to build consistently and steadily over a period of months and years with no wild regressions along the way. In my own training, now, kind of on the flip side of this, for the past year and a half or so, I've been taking the polar opposite approach to these high frequency, high specificity approaches that I used more so in my youth. I'm still young, but in my youth, and using now a style of conjugate training that only has me see any specific lift variation maybe once per month at most. And with my current conjugate style of training, I'm able to build strength across countless exercise variations. I ensure that there are no weak links anywhere in the chain, and important for me, I avoid overuse while also at the same time becoming too dependent on precision execution in order to execute well. Remember, I was talking about that efficiency aspect earlier. I pride myself on being inefficient now, right? In fact, I'm so imprecise that my imprecision is imperceptible to me. That is a goal of mine now. And how strong can I become moving forward with the absolute smallest workload of strength work possible, rather than what I used to look at back in the day is how much work can I do? Now I want to say, how little work can I possibly do? And remember, there's no right or wrong way to do any of this shit. There's only making gains and not making gains. And whatever side of the fence that you sit on at any moment in time is going to depend on a myriad of different variables. But if you do find yourself being tempted by the gods of high frequency or high specificity, I just think it's important to keep this little caveat in mind, this video concept in mind as you embark on your journey. High frequency training, it can be very fun and it can be very productive. But remember, at the end of the day, it is a double-edged sword, and you do become a slave to it.